IT skills webinar, a new beginning. It's labeled as a new beginning because there are a number of things that I want to tell you about that are coming very, very shortly from us, as well as some good news about various other things that have happened over the last few weeks to help you with the current apprenticeships. I'm joined today very kindly by my colleague Amelia Bodle, who will be watching the questions. We have 2 or 3 question slots throughout the presentation, so we will stop at those points and take them, and hopefully I can answer your questions on the webinar. If not, then as usual, we will take the questions afterwards, put them into a document and answer them if we need to speak with colleagues to get more definitive information for you, and we'll send those out along with a PDF of the actual slides. It is being recorded, so we do hope that the recording will work properly, and once again that will appear in our digital and IT update section on the website. So agenda, quick mitigation reminder, quick bit about processes, question and answer sessions, up next and contacts, but in amongst there, we're going to give you some details around the new digital support technician. So mitigation reminder and update, you should have got your mitigation intention forms in by the end of July. If you haven't done so, then you need to be speaking to the mitigation team or customer services to find out how you get around that. These dates were agreed with Ofqual, so they are not that flexible. Assessment mitigation results need to be uploaded by the 30th of September. However, I am sure for those of you who've been working with the credit-based qualifications, you will have wanted to have got those results in and done and dusted and got those results out to your learners by now so that they can move on either to apprenticeships, further education or higher education as necessary. Don't forget, if you've got anything that involves an evolve test and you're not using the remote invigilation, which mainly applies to the apprenticeship standards, then you will need to use the CAG tool, the calculated assessment grade tool, to upload those results to Walled Garden. In terms of the EPA Synoptic project dispensation, this has now been extended until the end of September. It was meant to be only up until the end of July, but in discussions with NSAR, they have now extended that right till the end of September. In terms of functional skills, for the level 2s, doesn't really affect digital because we have no level 2s currently, but for things like customer services, for example, where your learners were expected to achieve level 1 functional skills, but also take level 2, whether they achieved or not, didn't matter. That relaxation of them not having to do the level 2 will now extend right through to the end of the year. And we are still accepting digital signatures for documents and forms. Also, the other thing to remind you, as people are starting to think about going back into colleges and the training provider premises, the government is pushing very hard for schools and colleges and the FE world to reopen. We do have risk assessment forms and guidance on that return to face-to-face operation. So assessment mitigation for the digital skills, the link to the mitigation document. As we've said in previous webinars, this document has had slight changes to it over the period of time from when it was first issued, so please make sure you do have the latest copy. It should be revision at least 1.3. Credit based, so the calculated level 1s, the results should have been in by the beginning of July. Level 2 and above, we had as adapt with one mitigation option, which is a short report from an employer if you were using an apprenticeship framework, or if you were using them as classroom-based products, then as a provider, you needed to do an audit of what they've done and a short report to show what evidence you had. that could cover any outstanding outcomes and assessment criteria. Needed to do a QA and a professional discussion to fill in the gaps that you will have found. On program knowledge for the apprenticeship standards, we also chose to do as adapt two mitigation options here. So remote invigilation, if you use remote invigilation, because it is a web-based evolve test, that will automatically put results into the system. However, if you are for any reasons not able to do that, either staff resources or learners haven't really got decent broadband or the ability to do that because equipment isn't available, there's only one laptop in the household, for example, with a camera, and that's being used by other people in the household, then again, we have the short report from the employer or provider to show what evidence that you've had and been able to gather through collecting information for their portfolios to cover the knowledge outcomes, and again, the QA or professional discussion to fill in gaps. In the second case here, because that is replacing an evolve test, don't forget you will have to use the calculated assessment grade tool, the CAG tool, to upload the results. Adaptation step-by-step guide. I am not going to go through this in detail. You will get this in the PDF, but it is about making sure you've got the people and they are in a position to actually complete the qualification, whatever it may be, audit their information, see what you've got, what are you going to use as your assessment method in light of not having everything, etc., all the way through to the submissions at the end there. Endpoint assessment, we've mentioned the dispensation from NSAR, so projects at home, no supervision, but you have to tell us. Your apprentices have to keep time, remembering that they are not allowed any more time than stated in the standard. So 3 days for infrastructure technician, up to 5 days for things like network engineer. We suggest that you agree a schedule with them and that you have a hard and fixed deadline. You should not move the deadline of when you want the evidence information back to you to upload to the EPA portal. Remember, for network engineer and infrastructure technician, we do have the virtual assessment service available. So that allows them to actually do it using a product called Packet Tracer, so there's no need for physical kit. Two documents, endpoint assessment dispensation declaration form and the timing form, can be found on the update and webinar pages for digital and IT skills. All the links that you need to get to the mitigation document, submitting of grades, how to run remote invigilation, the link to the digital and IT updates and webinars page, face-to-face delivery, COVID-19 updates, please keep checking those. We are still making adjustments to the COVID-19 page, not just the EPA bit, but all of it, as things still change and as we're allowed to do more with you and as Ofqual allow us to do more things along the way. How to use digital signatures, and also we've got a further education survey running at the moment, and we'll keep that going for quite a while. It's really to get us to understand whether the mitigation things that we've been able to put in place have helped, have worked, and whether you would like to see some of that continue in the future. So I'm going to stop very briefly there and see if there are any questions.
I don't currently have any questions at all.
Brilliant. Okay, so let's move on. So announcing the next digital standard that we're going to offer. It's the first of three. The digital support technician, and the number for it will be 9700. We will be doing the IT technical sales, and that should come out sometime in September. And following that, we will be doing the data analyst as well, and we're looking to get that out hopefully by Christmas, and it will be based on the new standard and the new EPA method. So first and foremost, who's it aimed at? I'm sorry, this is a busy slide. I'm not going to read it all, but it is the the key points that I want to bring out here. So a digital support technician is for those involved in making sure that the use of digital office technology is used to the most effective way it can be. It also consists of two pathways. So there's a digital applications technician, there's a digital service technician in there as well. We see this product as very complementary to the current infrastructure technician and also the new infrastructure technician in the way it's been revised, which is much more networky and hardware-y based. So this is more about what sits over the top of the networks than it is about the networks themselves. The typical job roles, so people involved in digital coaching, transformation, ICT support analysts, digital champions, administrators, etc. And the service technicians will be, again, people in frontline service operations supporting people's use of the software that is running over the systems. Now, whether that be a CMIS system like in a college, whether that be customer relationship management, whether it's accounting, whether it's just the normal operations of office automation, so word processing, spreadsheets, etc. That's where that sort of people sit. We will be providing separate handbooks for each pathway. We've taken the decision that we feel it is better to have two handbooks in the case for this product, so that you can make the clear distinction of what will be involved if you are taking somebody down one of these routes, rather than the confusion of having everything in one and people wondering, well, which EPA tests do we need to use for these people, which do we need for the applications technician or versus the service technician. So there will be two distinct and separate handbooks. Key points: there are no on-program qualification requirements. So how you teach this, what resources you use, will be down to you. Now, City & Guilds is looking to develop an apprenticeship training manual, but that won't be here until early 2021. So in the meantime, you really need to study the standards and our handbooks when they arrive to look at the typical sort of evidence that will be required for other parts of the EPA in order to make a judgment of what resources you're going to use. There is no occupational brief. Will be no confusion as to should we be doing this to meet the standard, or should we be following exactly the occupational brief as if it's assessment criteria. The way standards are being written now, what is required for any outcome is written next to the outcome directly. They will not be some sort of document produced 3 months, 6 months, or a year down the line. Once the standards have been produced, you will see very clearly from day one what the employer group had in mind to meet the outcomes. There are core and optional outcomes, clearly for the two pathways. There will be a core that needs to be understood and learnt, and then optionals depending on which way you go, whether it's the application or service technician. We're still looking at technical skills and technical knowledge, but the behaviours are basically core behaviours, so they are common to both pathways. And as I say, outcomes have requirements defined. So here's a couple of examples here. So digital technologies, so uses a range of digital office technologies, including collaborative tools, appropriately for internal and external communications. For example, office suites, conferencing facilities, mass email tools, etc. So that's a skill, and then a knowledge and understanding criteria. So digital learning, so studies using digital resources to extend knowledge and skills in the use of new digital systems or features and other skills. And I've repeated it twice, it is of 15 months duration. Okay, that's what the employers believe the minimum amount of learning time is going to be required for either of these pathways. As usual, it is down to the government's rule of 366 days or 365 days plus a week. depending on which documents you read, as the barest minimum. But we would still advise that for your first cohorts, you would look at 15 months of learning and then building 2 to 3 months in after that to cover the EPA period. In terms of gateway, many of the standards documents now are being very clear that it's the employer that will determine when the apprentice is ready for the endpoint assessment. Okay, it is recommended that it's in consultation with the training provider. I would always say, as we have done in our very first webinars and in our face-to-face events, that this should be a three-way collaboration. It really shouldn't just be down to an employer going, I've had enough, just put them through EPA, or a provider just going, hang on a minute, we've got to the end of the learning period, we've got to get them through EPA. You, the employer, and the apprentice have got to be confident that the apprentice has the best opportunity of achieving a good outcome in the EPA before you put them through. We'll also require confirmation that level 2 maths and English have been achieved, and as always, that can have been prior to the apprenticeship or during the apprenticeship. So if they come to you with GCSEs, fine, or if they come to you because they've got functional skills because they've already done that for something else, fine, we don't mind as long as they have that level 2. There has to be confirmation that the apprentice is working at or above the level set out in the standard and can demonstrate all the knowledge, skills and behaviour. So this will be our usual declaration form signed by all 3 parties. Confirmation the employer believes the apprentice is ready for the endpoint assessment and they've demonstrated the knowledge, skills and behaviour. So that goes back to the previous one. They are going to have to sign that declaration document. Confirmation the apprentice has produced a portfolio. Now the difference here is that the portfolio, and it is still a summative portfolio, has to be loaded at Gateway. The portfolio is not part of the assessment as it has been in the current apprenticeship standards for digital. However, it forms the basis for the interview that will happen as part of the EPA. Again, we would still recommend the use of the STAR approach that we have been championing in previous webinars and events to make sure that your apprentices are showing themselves in their best light. And if you can't remember what that is, please go to the Digital and IT Update and Webinars session and look at the webinars that we did back in March around best practice for summative portfolios. So it must be submitted to the EPA once the apprentice meets the gateway requirements and before they prepare their case study presentation and before the interview. Okay, so as part of the EPA, there is a case study presentation and an interview, and they are not allowed to start that until we have the portfolio with us. Yes, as always, you know, the usual statements around it was normally be produced towards the end of the apprenticeship and before Gateway. Going to keep emphasizing that this time round. But, you know, as we've always said, you should be gathering a portfolio of evidence from day one when the apprentice starts, because there may be things that they have opportunities to do early on in the apprenticeship that they don't have the opportunity to do later on. And if you don't capture that evidence early, then you will be missing out on potentially some good stuff to cover outcomes within the actual standard itself. So it will showcase their best work. That's why I'm saying it's still a summative portfolio, and it will enable them to demonstrate in the interview how they've applied the knowledge. So we've always said it isn't about regurgitation of curriculum. It is about showing us how you've taken the knowledge that's been given the apprentice and how they use that in the skills and behaviors in the real work environment. Now, I want to emphasize in a real work environment to achieve real work objectives. For those of you who've been working with us for a number of years now, you'll know that for real work environment, we will also accept things that have been set, but only a small amount, where things in the employer are not allowed to be done by the apprentice. So things that might involve secure information, if it was working in a hospital, maybe dealing and doing things with patient information, etc., then we do allow you to do certain things around a real work environment. And actually, in this apprenticeship standard, if you read the standard and the assessment plan, it is actually stated in there that anything to do with confidentiality or security or things of that nature can be done in a real work environment that isn't actually in the employer's work environment. But again, it has to be to achieve a real work objective. So all the things we've said in the past about linking any sort of task that you set them has to be linked back to how that would work in the employer. So the evidence should comprise stuff from the workplace and taken together cover all the knowledge, skills and behaviours as in the current assessment plans that we have to date. Minimum amount of evidence required to demonstrate all the KSBs. So we are now seeing much more specific information about what is classed as substantial or minimum or maximum amount of evidence that can be uploaded. So for the portfolio, it would typically include a minimum of 2 pieces of evidence up to a maximum of 15 pieces of evidence. Now, if you only use 2 pieces of evidence, you and the apprentice and even the employer need to be very, very sure that you have covered all of the knowledge, skills and behaviours. Unlike the current apprenticeships, if it isn't all there, we cannot pick other things up in other parts of the EPA. So it's got to be there. In terms of the endpoint assessment, there are 2 distinct methods that will happen. There's knowledge tests comprised of 2 elements, one on the core knowledge and one on specialist knowledge for each pathway. They are multiple choice tests and they will assess the underpinning knowledge and understanding. The second part is a case study, presentation and interview comprised of 2 parts. So there's a case study that will give the apprentice the opportunity to present something that they've done in real life. And they have to take that case study from the workplace. That cannot be real work environment tasks set outside of the workplace. And that will be followed by a structured interview with an independent assessor who will further assess their knowledge, skills and behaviours from the case study presentation, but also it will draw on things that have been seen and shown in that portfolio. So the knowledge test of the case study can be done in any order, but both methods must be passed in order for the apprentice to achieve. So the knowledge tests are only pass-fail, and they have to pass both of the units to achieve that pass, so the core and the specialist knowledge unit. And then the case study presentation and interview will be pass, fail, merit and distinction. There is a grid that works out whether they'll get pass, fail, merit or distinction. I haven't shown it here, but it is in the assessment plan and it will be in our handbooks to make it very, very clear. The overall apprenticeship is pass, fail, merit and distinction, as I say. In terms of resit or retake, and the difference there is a resit is they don't need further learning because they've totally misunderstood something or they've not really been able to demonstrate the skills, so they've got to go and relearn those skills. That would be a retake where they have to go back through some learning in order to do it. A resit is they just missed something. They just didn't explain something very well in the interview. It was something very simple that they clearly, the knowledge was there, but they couldn't bring it out in some way. Regardless of which scenario, there is only one option of reapplying for a resit retake within walled garden, and they only have to take the element they failed. So if they failed the knowledge tests, then they only have to retake the knowledge test they failed. If they fail the case study presentation and interview, then they only have to redo the case study presentation and interview. And yes, if they redo the case study presentation and interview, it will still be marked as pass, fail, merit, and distinction, because it will have to be a redo. It won't just be a tidy up. So we've been motoring along quite a lot here, so I'll stop again and see if there are any questions.
Well, up until literally 2 seconds ago, there weren't any, but one's just literally come in. So Dee has asked, how much will a resit cost?
So we are pricing the product at around £800. So that's £25 registration, £775 for EPA. But then because they have to take the two, they can take either part separately. Resitting the evolve tests will be £25 each, and the case study presentation and interview will be £700. The reason it is still quite high is because the independent assessor has to go back through all of the information, has to reread the portfolio and redo the interview, but it won't be the full 775 if they only do the case study presentation and interview element. And if they only fail the knowledge tests, then as I say, it will only be £25 per test.
Thank you. And Dee says thank you as well. That's the only question.
Okay. So quick recap then. So mitigation reminders, make sure you've seen the latest MVQ VRQ document, make sure you have submitted your mitigation intentions, and most importantly, make sure you are setting up your EQA visits. If you are not on direct claim status, if you are classed as a medium or high risk centre at this moment in time, you need to get those EQA visits booked in, otherwise your results won't be confirmed. And you need to make sure that they do, because we need those results by the end of September. Digital support technician, no mandatory on program quals, 2 pathways, digital application technician, digital service technician. The portfolio is submitted as part of Gateway, although it is still summative and their best work. It's a 2-part EPA. There are knowledge tests, and there's a case study presentation and interview. And the interview will also cover the work in the portfolio, not just the case study presentation. We've got more good news for you. Some of you who I've spoken to in the past, either on the phone or events, will know that one of the things that has been a complete bugbear for all of us is the fact that the on-program knowledge qualification vendor products has not really been updated or revised or allowed to be expanded since we started this nearly 6 years ago. I am pleased to say that that has changed. So we put a document to NSAR and to IFATE, must be nearly 3 months ago, to say, look, these are products that have changed. These are products that you didn't get quite right. You got the names wrong in the original documents, and these are other vendors that we're seeing in here. Ironically, one of the other vendors happens to be Huawei, but there you go. We got notification last week that IFATE are saying, look, as these things are going anyway, we will allow the EQA body, so NSAR, and the EPAOs now to determine whether or not a vendor product fits and meets the requirement. So we do have a document with all the things that we put forward, and we will be sending that out to everybody when we've got it into a shape that doesn't offend our brand managers. So it does include all of the original vendor qualifications, because some people may come to you and already have those. It'll also have some missed vendors, as I've mentioned. You can't just do what you like, however. If there is something that you think fits against a knowledge qualification or is the equivalent of one of the products that is on the list, then you need to send that to us and you need to show us how it is equivalent to an existing product or how it meets the knowledge. We will check that. We will either ask one of our independent assessors to check that, or we'll go back to a vendor and check that. And if agreed, then we will add that to the list. We're not going to do this ad infinitum because clearly next year, when the revised standards kick in and these go away, then we're going to have to draw a close at some point. But as I say, the good news is more vendor acceptance, bigger lists, better lists. Also, a look at the way that the Cisco products can be offered. Unfortunately, it doesn't work for private training providers. They are not allowed to use the Net Academy for education establishments in the same way. But there is the option there for people who do work through Net Academy, the educational side, to use the end assessments of the 3 modules that now make up Cisco CCNA. Other good news, and I literally found this out last Friday, because we're doing some work on extending our digital credentials, our digital badges, but all of our endpoint assessments now have a digital badge associated with them. So if your apprentices get a pass, merit, or distinction in any of the current standards we offer, then they should get a badge. However, there's a caveat to that. You need to be making sure that when you do the EPA booking, you are providing the apprentice's email address. So when the EPA is completed, if they pass or they get a merit or they get a distinction, then that's the information we use to send them the link to claim their badge. If you haven't done that to date, don't panic. My colleague who's responsible for digital badges will be sending me a list of all the ones that have gone through where there isn't an email address, and we will get out to the centres to ask them to provide the information if the apprentice wants to under GDPR, etc., and then we can issue those badges. So from now on, whenever you're making your bookings for EPA, make sure that you include the apprentice's email address and they will get badges similar to these. And that, if you're responsible for other areas apart from digital, please note that if you're working with city and guilds, virtually every single one of our EPAs now has these badges. The other thing that we're about to work on is actually badging the on-program qualifications as well. So for your apprentices going through doing the on-program quals, they can get that badge. So if for whatever reason something happens and they have to drop out of the program, at least they'll walk away, not just with a certificate from the qualification, but they'll have the digital badge to put onto their LinkedIn profile, Facebook, Twitter, etc. And a quick update around the digital standard review. So which of our offers are affected? So it's network engineer. We're waiting for the final sign off on that and the funding band assignment. We think it's going to be more or less the same as it is now, but until the ink's dry on the paper from iFate, we don't want to jinx it. The new EPAs, with the exception of cybersecurity, are all looking to be some sort of portfolio submission and then some form of presentation, followed up by an interview. So there will be 2 parts to them, and the key thing to remember going forward when these kick in is if something is tested in one segment of the EPA, it cannot and will not be assessed or allowed to be assessed in the other parts. They have to get it right in wherever the knowledge module or the skills, sorry, the knowledge outcome or the skills outcome or the behavior outcome sits. They won't get a second chance. In terms of software developer, that was almost ready to go, but there are some tweaks being made to that and to the EPA. IFATE have sent that back to the employers for a couple of adjustments, and again the funding will need to be determined on that. There have been some changes to it. There's also been some changes to the software developer technician, so we are now looking at whether we should include that in our portfolio going forward, because certainly some of the supervisory stroke management stuff has been taken out of that development technician, which was labeled as a level 3. Cybersecurity work's been completed by the employer group, although we did get an email last Thursday saying that IFATE were a bit concerned that the endpoint assessment was either too hard or too easy. They couldn't quite make up their mind, it would seem. So there are some adjustments being made to that. It actually has 4 parts of EPA, although one part is an interview that wraps up some of the other parts. So please watch this space. Infrastructure technician, there was a plan to merge it with unified comms. There was also a plan for infrastructure technician to have several pathways within it. So either one for Unicomms and then one for more networky type stuff. The last we heard, there were potentially going to be 3. That's now being relooked at. It's been sent back to the employer group to revise and also to make the decision as to whether or not unified comms should be wrapped up into the product and it become infrastructure communications technician or something of that nature. So we're still waiting on the outcomes. Oopsie. Things come up there that should have waited, but here we go. Which of our offers aren't affected? So digital marketer, that's not affected. It now sits in the sales route panel at IFATE. Digital support technician won't be affected. It's new and it will not be reviewed for at least 3 years. IT technical sales, which we'll be releasing, as I say, in September. Again, that's not part of the digital route panel anymore. We're not quite sure who it sits with. We think it sits with sales, but nobody wants to own up to owning it. The new standards are planned to be signed off for delivery from January 2021. So that's a provisional date. That's the expected. We might see network engineer published before that. We might see cybersecurity published before that. But the employer groups have said, because of what has been happening since March, you have not been able to sit down and go through this stuff. I mean, you haven't even seen it yet, and been able to have meetings around how you're going to plan your curriculum going forward. So they have asked that regardless of whether anything gets signed off between now and the end of the year, that we look at January as the earliest cutover, and it will be a cutover. From whenever these apprenticeships go live, you will not be able to register on any of the current apprenticeships anymore. That doesn't mean the ones that you have currently will stop. So anybody you register between now and the end of the year will stay on the current program. Okay, so they will be able to go forward. In terms of whether they will be able to swap to a different EPA method once the new ones kick in, we are still waiting on firm guidance for that. However, because of the changes that are being made to some of the standards, we think that may not be possible even if it were allowed. So all new apprentices will have to register on the new ones once the date is announced. Finally then, as usual, some information about our support. So centre support, general inquiries, you can get through to them, send them an email. If the requirement is a technical answer, then they will send it through to the technical advisors, i.e. myself in the case of digital, or my colleague Amelia if you're dealing with hospitality and catering. But also if there are processes and things that you need to understand and go through, then they can get you through to what we call the EPA success team, the people who can talk you through the processes of uploading stuff to the portal, booking your EPAs on walled garden, etc. As always, please make sure you are checking, I wouldn't say daily, but at least every other day, the COVID-19 page on the City and Guilds website for any changes to anything around qualifications you deal with. So COVID-19 dispensations has the EPA stuff, has stuff around functional skills, qualifications update, digital learning resources, support and contact numbers as well. We've had 4 propositions in terms of providing you with materials to help you through the lockdown and even the easing of lockdown as we're going forward. So learning materials to support management of COVID-19, access to platforms and content for distance learning where it's available, and tools to help an apprentice work with a remote assessor to prepare for endpoint assessment. So if you register an apprentice with us, you've always had access to Smart Screen and the endpoint assessment materials are there, and we will continue to keep those going. And for the new standards, obviously we'll be looking to revise the information for those going forward. We've also had a paid solution for those working with infrastructure technician, network engineer, or digital marketer. The digital marketer will carry on as is, but we will be reviewing the infrastructure technician and network engineer materials to see how we can adapt the information that's in those to the new standards. In terms of network engineering, making up a Cat5 cable isn't going to change very much next week from it does this week. So, there's a wealth of material in there around resources and information and those sorts of things that we will be able to continue to use. Also, one of the things that we hadn't mentioned before, anybody who's doing unified comms, or if you've got colleagues working at other providers doing unified comms and they're not working with us, tell them about the unified comms apprenticeship training manual. We've had it out there, it's been there, and it is downloadable through Smart Screen. So, it's well worth having a look at to help. And that will also, for those of you working with that product, give you a good guide as to the sort of things we're going to need to do going forward as the on-program qualifications get removed from the standards. Certificates, the things that we will accept, certainly at Gateway, so PLR information, candidate history from walled garden, your CMIS or SIMS information, as long as it's authenticated and signed by the appropriate exams officer, national records of achievement. And I've already mentioned about the functional skills and the fact that there's been a relaxation for anybody doing level 2 standards. There's no requirement at this moment in time or until December 2020 to actually take the level 2, but they have to achieve and complete level 1. EPA Process Support, so I mentioned the EPA Customer Success Team, so they can be got to through the customer services people if you need advice and guidance about the journey, but equally you can go to your business account manager or you can come to the technical advisors. We don't see walled garden the way you do. We don't have access to the EPA portal in the way the customer success team do, but we can talk you through a lot of what needs to be done and also get somebody from that team to help. We also have the EPA partnership managers. We have a new lady joined us, Maurice Hole, who's now responsible for the Southwest. Spookily, she actually comes from my old alma mater of Western College. So, she is firmly based down in the Southwest area to support centres there. Please get in touch with them. They're there to help you again with issues around EPA, if things get stuck in the system, if you're not getting certificates, if you're not getting IFACE certificates, or if you think you should have had them, or your apprentice thinks they should have had them, or the employer thinks they should have had them but not arrived. These are the people that can find out why and make it happen. Okay, they will also help in working with you and working with employers so that employers fully understand their role and obligation, especially going forward, where the standards are stating very clearly that employers need to be the people determining whether the apprentice is ready. If that's the case, employers need to understand this process very, very clearly. Upcoming webinars, so we will use the phrase keep in touch for all of them, but as with this one, where we did change the description and resent it out to say that we would be talking about the digital support technician, we will change them as new things come on board. Obviously, the next one on the 25th of August is preparation going into the new academic year, but it will also see a week or so after the opening of the digital support technician. That is due to open for registrations by the 14th of August, with EPA bookings being open from the first week of September. We'll then do one on the 15th of September, and hopefully we'll be able to tell you more about the IT Tech Sales product at that point, and then we'll be going into October. We will be doing these every 3 weeks, unless I'm on holiday or it's a bank holiday or the Southwest suddenly falls into the sea or something. We want to make sure that there is an opportunity for you to get on and hear what is going on a regular basis. However, that does not stop you in the meantime contacting customer service or myself or David Wackett, the industry manager, about any concerns or issues you have. It doesn't stop you contacting your business account manager or any of the EPA partnership managers if you need help and support. Please do. We can do sessions specifically for you and for your team around any issues that you have. Learner progression, recruitment and onboarding, that's what that further education survey is about, and about what we've done in terms of mitigation. Please complete this. We put it out there a couple of times. I think we've got up to about 20 people, bearing in mind that well over 100 to 200 odd people have seen this link. Please tell us. We need this. We are looking at keeping remote invigilation going, potentially as a proctoring service. If it goes forward as a proctoring service, we may have to charge for that service. So again, we need to know what you want, and we can't do that if you stay silent. Finally, other useful contacts and links. So the apprenticeship at cityandguilds.com. So that was covering, obviously, apprenticeship frameworks as well as standards. So if you need any information, it's well worth going to that. Again, that COVID-19 page, please check it. Apprenticeship Hub. So if you go to there, it'll tell you things about apprenticeships, what's coming, what's available, whether it's got on program or whether it's just EPA. All of that information is there. And walled garden booking guides, exam admin for the exam admin teams, and the endpoint assessment booking guides. All of those things can be found under the apprenticeship hub. And you obviously are registered for email updates, otherwise you wouldn't have known that this was taking place. But what we are finding is that some of your colleagues aren't. Apologies. Some of your colleagues aren't. Have seen a comment recently to us saying didn't even know these things were happening, and it's because either the exams have signed up for these, or managers or supervisors or team leaders have signed up for these, and the information isn't getting out to the wider curriculum team. Regardless of whether you only deal with digital or not, if you've got other people in your college or your training provider, tell them about the email updates. This is the way we send out information of launch programs, of the webinars, of anything that is going to affect you. It goes out through that system. So please get them signed up. And if you heard about this from somebody else, they sent you the link and you haven't signed up, get yourself signed up. Also, there's my email address and David's, and obviously this will come to you as part of the presentation when we send it out. So Final opportunity for questions.
Okay, so I've got a number of questions that have come through now, but can you first flick back to the slide with the survey details on?
Yep.
Because I've been asked to put it into the chat box, so I can do that whilst I'm then sort of asking you some more questions. Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the first question is, in relation to digital technician, can vendor training be incorporated into the apprenticeship to prepare for the knowledge test?
So there are no vendor qualifications linked with the knowledge tests. They will be tests developed by the EPAOs themselves. But in terms of what you use for on programming, so for the learning over that 15-month period, that will be totally down to you. If you think that something from a particular vendor matches very neatly to the outcomes and will help produce the required evidence for an apprentice against those outcomes, then by all means you can use them. Okay, you won't necessarily anymore be able to pay for the certifications. That's the other thing, because they won't be recognized as part of the on program section, and we won't recognize them as part of the EPA. Then you won't necessarily be able to use your payments from funding to pay for the certificates, but you could pay for it for the learning, as long as, you know, when you're audited by ESFA, you can show that that learning was relevant.
Perfect. And Sarah actually asked a question about the revised standards, but I think you sort of amply covered that in your presentation. And she did also say that she would definitely welcome you or us taking on board the software development technician into the portfolio.
Okay, thank you.
And lastly, Claire has asked, will you provide feedback on the EPA if the learner fails?
Yes, so we've always provided feedback for fails of any apprentice, so that definitely comes out. In the early days, I'll be totally honest and say, you know, some was better than others, but our lead independent assessors have worked very hard to try and get that standardized. The other thing that is also happening behind the scenes, and we mentioned this a while ago, is that City and Guilds has invested in a product called EPA Pro. The idea behind EPA Pro is it will be a one-stop shop product for people doing apprenticeship standards with us. So it will be the registration, it will be the place for booking on program qualifications, the place for booking EPA tests, the place for booking the EPA itself, but also it will become the repository for the feedback from our independent assessors, regardless of whether the apprentice passes or fails. And access will be available to you, to the employer, and potentially access to the apprentice. We are still working on the mechanics of how that access is provided, whether you have to ask us to do it or whether we give you an admin type password, for want of a better phrase, as we do with things like Smart Screen and Walled Garden, that then those people can offer other limited access to the system. So we do feedback right now for anybody that fails, but we are looking from the new year to start rolling out feedback in terms once EPA Pro is up and running, to all apprentices, regardless of whether they pass or fail. The product has been in test now with about 4 or 5 centres, so we know it's working. We're going to build the numbers up slowly, because obviously we don't want a huge hit of everybody going at once, especially with products like business admin, where the numbers are huge. because we don't want it to, you know, we just want to make sure that it is sustainable and maintainable as we go along.
Lovely, thank you. And Dee has asked, will you be working with training providers' employers to come up with the questions for the EPA tests?
Yes, we have done. So we've been working with a group of consultants. One of the nice things is that the chair of employers group for DST also happens to be one of our employer providers. So we are having them sense check what we are doing in terms of that product as well. So we're not leaving things to chance. We also have the RAF, who've actually had people on program for nearly 12 months now on DST. I mean, they put people on there before there was even an EPAO registered. We're also getting them to do a sense check on it as well. And we have a couple of training providers who've got people they've started on program in May. We're going to them as well. So we are doing everything we possibly can to make sure that what we're going to put out there is the right product and the questions are being asked in the right way. Now, it is new. People's interpretation of some of these things will always differ slightly. So, you know, we will monitor the questions when they're first put out there, and anything that is flagged as ambiguous or where it is seen that there is possibly two or more answers to a question, we will certainly get those revised, taken out, changed, whatever needs to be done very, very quickly.
Okay, and the next question is from Stuart. With digital support technician, he didn't see employer reference. Are references not being used for qualifications when the standards are revised?
The employer reference has gone. Yep, you're absolutely right. It has gone, but don't forget, it is the employer that's got to sign that declaration form. We are not clear as to whether the employer groups or IFATE want us to change our declaration form slightly in order that there is some sort of commentary from the employer. But at this moment in time, it looks like all revised standards, there will be no employer reference.
Lovely, thank you. And Francesca would like to know, with Evolve mitigation, how long it's going to be running for, the remote tests?
So at this moment in time, the way it is currently running is liable to run certainly until the end of September. Our colleague who is responsible for looking at what is happening in terms of how do we move forward, do we go to proctoring so that you don't have to set up any invigilators, basically we'll do all of that, hence the reason why there may be a cost associated to doing it. We're looking at a number of different options for that, but it's a question that I will need to ask now we're in August, because basically it means we've only got 2 months left of this, and we know it's been working quite well for a number of people, and certainly I would like to keep it going if we possibly can, if it's helping you. Hence the reason for the survey. That's why we want to know, do you still want these things? Because it gives David and myself the weight to go back to areas of the business responsible for these things and say, you can't just switch the tap off, you know, look at the good things this is doing for us. So we will look to get it extended, but at the moment, the intention was to stop it on the 31st of July. Sorry, 31st of September.
Well saved. Yeah. And that's it. That's absolutely it. No more questions.
So it only remains for me to say thank you to Amelia for her support and doing the question bit today, but also thanks to all of you. As always, we are seeing very good results in the digital space. We're still achieving 95, 96% pass rate. I'm only gutted to say that Amelia's Hospitality and Catering is currently receiving 100%, so we need to pull our finger out. But that is down to you. It's down to the fact that you do talk to us, you are listening to the advice and guidance, and where you need it, please just drop us a note, just drop us an email, and we will continue to do that either directly with you or through these webinars as we continue. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day, and if we don't see you again, we look forward to hearing you on the 25th of August. Cheers.